good lighting doesn't have to be expensive, but again, it goes back to having to be intentional and really understand what it is you're doing. It's a domino effect with lighting. You know, we never lay out a plan without understanding the furniture first. It's case by case always. There's no layout criteria that we can use for every project. Is everybody happy that we're working with? Are we creating a good experience for our clients and the design team? I think that's super important. For us, it's like how a song can change the atmosphere of a space. Lighting, you know, we feel can do the same. Making sure that, again, areas are punctuated with light and that there is room for shadow and darkness to create that contrast in a space. I like to say sometimes we're more like vibe technicians. I think lighting needs to be more intentional. It doesn't need to be expensive. It doesn't need to have a lot of light to be good light. It just has to be really well thought out.
Welcome to the LytePOD, built by LytePOD, the #1 podcast for the people, process, and product behind design, all with a little love for light along the way. I'm your host, Sam Koerbel, and today we're lucky to welcome Garrett Neal to the podcast. Today we're here to talk a little bit more about, what a lighting designer really does in terms of looking at elevating a luxurious environment and how that can be coordinated and how that can work together in harmony with someone like a custom home integrator, someone who's passionate about technology and getting all of those technical details right.
This episode is brought to you by LytePOD, a conference dedicated to educating and empowering custom home integrators across North America, providing training and certification programs, along with a full suite of product demonstrations and premier networking opportunities. As technology specialists learn how to adopt lighting as a new category, this event is leading the way, bringing an industry together. LytePOD ignites opportunity and enables integrators to thrive in the expanding world of architectural lighting. Visit LytePOD.com to learn more. And now, let's get to know our guest a little bit more.
Garrett, how you doing? Welcome to the podcast.
Good, man. Thanks for having me.
Tell us, just a little bit about your journey to fall in love with light and what really makes you tick and what has you excited right now?
Yeah, so I'm a second generation lighting designer, actually. My dad's a lighting designer, Ron. So I started working with him during college. Always had seen him drawing and designing around the house growing up. His background was in architecture and interior design. I come from a long line of electricians. So my grandpa was an electrician. My great-grandpa was an electrician, so I guess just by nature, I was destined to be a lighting nerd. I like to say sometimes we're more like vibe technicians than lighting designers. Oftentimes it's not just about designing the lighting, we're engineering well-being. I really feel like there's an importance to lighting because for us, it's like, how a song can change the atmosphere of a space. Lighting, we feel can do the same.
What, in your opinion, makes lighting consultants or lighting designers unique to their craft?
We're more about the ambience and, like I said, the vibe of the space. We're experts in lighting. We have a lot of experience with design itself and architecture and interiors. So I often say sometimes the lighting comes second for what we do. The full understanding of the architecture and then interiors is number one. So it's really having a good understanding of that as well. We are also objective specifiers, meaning that we don't have any relation to manufacturers. So we can kind of specify and work with who we feel is going to be the best for the project and best suits the client's needs.
What to you is the biggest driving factor? Is it understanding that vibe? Is it creating that vibe? Or is it trying to be a mind reader so that you know what's going to satisfy the client?
Yeah, it's knowing who you're working with for sure. I think taste is incredibly important, and aligning with, we're chameleons in that sense. So, understanding the interior designer's aesthetics, understanding the architect's aesthetics, researching their previous projects, so that we can best provide the best solution for the project.
Putting that environment together obviously results in something that is fun and enthusiastic and creates a certain set of emotion. But why does it matter so much to not only get the lighting right, but get the right light at an elite, at a high, luxurious, elevated level?
You can have the best interior finishes and the best furniture, the best architecture, but if the lighting sucks, everything else sucks. It really does make or break a project. And I know in the lighting community, we say that a lot. In a lot of ways, lighting is one of those things you don't notice until it's wrong. I think lighting needs to be more intentional. It doesn't need to be expensive. It doesn't need to have a lot of light to be good light. It just has to be really well thought out.
What's an example of a simple detail that makes or breaks, the good versus great versus the bad?
I'm sure you've been at a restaurant before, and they have like the scene that transitions from like the maybe afternoon to evening scene. And if you look around when that scene transitions, everybody kind of sits back a little bit. Everybody like relaxes a little bit more, And they probably didn't realize before that transition that they were a little bit more uneasy. Maybe the lighting was too bright. And I think that's a really good example how a lot of times people don't understand it until it affects them emotionally.
Obviously, you love lighting, but have you ever walked into an environment and been taken away because you didn't even know the lighting was so good? But it was, then like you had the aha moment.
I think it tends to happen more in public spaces and restaurants, oftentimes for me, or hotels. Contrast is key for those emotions, layers are key for those emotions. So not just having one form of light, having multiple forms of light, whether that be down lights and cove lights and millwork lighting, up lighting, all of these different things. Decorative lighting, table lamps are very important as well. And making sure everything is tuned appropriately. I'm often more drawn to spaces that have less light. Ironically, I'm a lighting designer, but again, it goes back to it being intentional. And so making sure that spaces aren't just washed out in just one form of ambient light, that we do have interesting shadows and darkness where it's needed is, in my opinion, just as important. Whether it's a residential project looking down a hallway, or it's a restaurant setting with spotlit tables.
You mentioned the word contrast earlier, a word that can sometimes be interpreted different ways. When you talk about it in your world of lighting, break down what contrast really is.
Contrast is just the difference between light and shadow and darkness. So making sure that, again, areas are punctuated with light and that there is room for shadow and darkness to create that contrast in a space. So using various optics on lights, right, from spots to floods can help create that. Layout certainly helps to create that. So the specifications and the design process all are important for creating that contrasted space.
Let's pick one of your favorite details. A simple one, but one that creates that visual contrast, that creates, luminous hierarchy in a space. Or let's break down not only why it matters, but when you get it right versus when you get it wrong, what happens?
Yeah, well, we could talk maybe about cove lights because those are really important to get right, and the dimensioning for cove lights. Picture a typical ceiling cove that bumps up in a space. When done incorrectly, the detail doesn't allow enough space for the light to spread across the ceiling. So you end up with this hot ring or this kind of hot spot around the perimeter of the cove. So it's really about increasing that depth in the ceiling and the distance that the fixture's mounted to evenly wash that. That one's really important. Graze coves as well, like a pocket in the ceiling to graze a texture. Making sure that's far enough up into the ceiling that you don't see the light fixture, that it's at the end of a corridor or at the end of a terminus, so that you're not seeing that fixture as well. But another super important detail for creating contrast and visual interest, usually kind of at the ends of your terminuses.
I want to go back to the cove real quick. So you've got a cove in a ceiling. You've got a light sitting on top of it, shining up, bouncing off, and you mentioned depth. What are the other things that you got to consider when you're, let's just say, building a cove, detailing a cove to make sure you get it right?
Man, for us, it's been a lot of trial and error, getting it wrong. Mock-ups can certainly, be made on site, bringing fixtures out to the site to position them appropriately. The more depth you have, the better in most cases for that particular detail. Yeah, if you don't want to end up with a hot spot around the cove, then increase the depth, increase the width, and you should be good.
Let's just say you've only got 4 inches and there's too much of a hot spot. Are there ways to mitigate that? Are there things you can do in terms of a product selection or modifying optics within the existing product to try to get a better result, even though it may not be the ideal outcome?
Yeah, it's a good question. There's fixtures on a 45-degree channel that really help with that, and I would recommend using that no matter what, even if it is you have the depth for that, to kick that light out further into the space. There's adjustable coves for even larger spaces that have higher depth that may be needed that are on an adjustable bracket. So that helps that light to kick out further out.
When you look at what you do from just creating one simple detail like a cove, who are you coordinating with to make sure that gets right? It's
typically the architect, interior designer. We're taking their backgrounds, their plans from their reflected ceiling plan, and then generating our lighting plan based on that. And so lots of coordination with them to verify framing and details. Things change a lot, so it's updating our plans when their plans update. So something we're kind of working out through the life of the project.
How often, or has it ever happened, where everything seems coordinated and you get to the field and it isn't that way?
In the past, it's happened for sure. One big thing is like millwork lighting, right? If you're talking about stuff that's going into shelving, cabinetry, things like that, that stuff changes a lot too. And so part of our scope, usually at the very end of the project, towards the end, is working closely with the millwork contractors as well. We generate typical details that show that lighting in the beginning. And we have to make sure those guys input our details and plans into what they're actually building. So that changes a lot, and a lot of times that gets missed. So it's making sure that those guys, pick up those details from our drawings, to avoid, seeing light where you don't want to see it in shelves and things like that. That one's always a moving target.
What does that process look like for you guys in terms of being meticulous about getting this information on paper?
Yeah, it's lots of follow-ups. It's lots of emails. It's lots of time. It's meetings with contractor. It's project status meetings with our internal team, following up on what they've been following up on, and some of our project managers. So, yeah, it takes a village, man.
The difference of moving a light in millwork 2 inches, what happens?
Yeah, that's the thing we say all the time. It's like it's a domino effect with lighting. We'll get our construction drawings done. We'll get everything pretty well engineered, ready to go. And there's always changes. And a small change often affects the lighting as well. Just when we're, just because we've done our full construction set doesn't mean that we're not making changes to the plans in the future. Most cases we are. And so a lot of people don't realize that small, and a lot of interior designers included, don't realize that small changes can be big when it comes to the lighting as well. So ceiling finishes, change the trim color, dimensions of coves would change the dimensions of the specified fixture. Everything kind of has to get relooked at.
When you guys look at navigating the process of understanding how to evaluate cost of a lighting design as it relates to just purely that equipment cost and maybe installation too, what are some of the challenges you face, but also what are some of the opportunities that you've found and been able to resolve in creating transparency through that process?
It's not a fun process. I can relate it to buying a car. I don't know anybody that really enjoys that process. Maybe some people do. But it's lighting is one of those things. You can't just typically go to the manufacturer and buy, right? You have to go through a dealer and you have to go through these other means of purchasing fixtures. And so therefore it's kind of ambiguous as to what things actually cost. Actually I had a project last week we met on. It's a restaurant project. And the restaurant owners were having a real hard time getting a quote from the electrician for what the lighting is going to cost. There was no official quote provided. They gave them a number, no transparency on what the fixtures actually cost. And there was pushback on our end because the electrician actually said that they typically go through one rep agency to purchase all of their lights. And so therefore the rep agencies weren't able to quote this fixture package. So that said, there's games that are played all the time in lighting and with budgeting, and we look at it like it is our duty to the client, and the value that we provide is to be able to give them some transparency on what things actually cost. So we don't sell or procure lights, but we go about it in different ways where we'll reach out to our reps and get unit pricing for them to create our own budgets to then give to the client. It's really hard to help them out when things aren't transparent, and it's really hard to make adjustments to lighting budgets if you don't actually know what things cost. So yeah, it's a big pain point, honestly, in what we do. And I think things would be, the clients would be better suited to get some more transparency if people were willing to provide that as a value. Good lighting doesn't have to be expensive. It can still be beautiful on a lower budget. But again, it goes back to having to be intentional and really understand what it is you're doing. And yeah, budgets they kind of suck.
In your experience, what's been the best way to collaborate with the right set of partners in order to get that budget to not only be acceptable to the client, but get all the information assembled and put together?
We don't typically, we're not shopping out our lighting to be subbed out, so we do a really good job, I think, of holding our specifications, which is why a lot of people are comfortable giving us those prices. So for us, it's working with distributors and manufacturers that are willing to provide that information so that we can best provide value for our clients. And most of the time when that's provided, it's something where the budget isn't as much of an issue as they originally might thought it was when they see it broken out and they see what that lighting actually costs. As opposed to sometimes you have, budgets that come out that it's a big lot number. It lumps in labor and materials and things all within that. It's really hard to assess. So we always recommend getting those unit prices for all of our budgets, for all of our projects. So when it does come time to make adjustments if needed. We can decide like if there's certain areas we want to splurge in, if there's unique fixtures that are more expensive that are going to be a higher priority, and if maybe there's some lower tier products that we can substitute that aren't going to impact the overall design.
When you look at the world of custom integration, there's a group full of technology specialists, of people who understand technical details of sophisticated systems or componentry. Looking at the beauty and the nature of the creativity behind design, what to you is at the forefront of lighting today that really is technology driven that has to be paid attention to?
Well, I think human-centric lighting, right? The ability to change the coloration of light is something I think, especially in the residential setting, a lot of people are coming to expect. You know, you have products that are smart bulbs now that people are pretty familiar with, and I think people inquire about that a lot. Technology is, it always just goes back to what the project is and what the needs are for it. So I can't say like there's like one specific type of technology that I think makes sense for every single project necessarily. Explaining to people what the difference is between a static white light, explaining to them what the difference is with a warm, dim light, what human-centric color-changing light is, I think is really important, especially in the residential setting, because everybody's needs and wants are going to be a little bit different. Everybody's lighting at the end of the day is subjective. So I think properly explaining that to them and what the pros and cons of are for those color dynamics of lighting is really important.
Walk me through them.
Well, okay, so static white lighting is just as it sounds. So you dim it, it stays the same color temperature. LEDs, as we know, they don't change color. So you start at 3000 Kelvin and you dim it down, it's still 3000 Kelvin. So it's a static white light. Warm dimming is what mimics what incandescent light used to do, or still does, but we no longer use, which starts at a specific color temperature around 3000 to 2700. And when you dim that, it actually changes coloration and gets warmer down to about like 2200-ish. So they've made LEDs now that mimic that. And so that's what warm dimming is. Dynamic lighting or human-centric lighting, as a lot of people are kind of referring to it as, changes coloration with any color that you want. So you can mix in any blue, any white, red if you want to get crazy. But I think the biggest benefit is that you can change the white spectrum on it. So having a cooler coloration of light, a warmer coloration of light to be programmed is what a lot of people are interested in right now as well.
You mentioned, obviously, there's different needs for spaces, and all these different technologies can be applied. When you look at a project design, do you try to stick with one single system like that? Or do you use a mix of technologies throughout a single project?
It's a good question. On our residential projects, we have mixtures. There could be warm dim throughout the home in most areas, and then there could be dynamic color changing light in specific areas. Some of these areas might be like an office space, a gym, a living room or kitchen, areas where they want the ability to change that color of light. So it's a mixture. It's not necessarily, we don't look at it like, we used to, where it's like you just pick one color temperature and that's what you get everywhere. So that it really goes back to understanding the space and the function and style and getting feedback from the clients as well.
Is there any instance that you're ever conflicted between, going static versus dynamic or warm dim versus dynamic?
Yeah, I mean, it takes a lot of work to make sure that everything's compatible and that everything's speaking the same language, especially with warm dimming, right? Because warm dimming rates change and colorations change, so it's it's verifying output and things like that. Sometimes, to your original question, maybe it's not a project that requires that type of technology or detail. We always ask those questions kind of early on, and again, it goes back to the style of the project. What are the interiors like? What's the architecture like? What are the finishes like? Is a really warm light going to be the best for it, or is a static white going to be something that works better? So it really just kind of depends.
When you're asking these questions about the architecture, the interiors, as a way to try to understand what to do with light, give me an example of what sort of feedback you're looking for from an interiors perspective so that you can make the right choice.
Elevations are the first place to start, typically.
And what are you looking for in that elevation?
So we're looking at like key elements that can be used from a lighting standpoint. What are, what's happening on those elevations that we can, effectively light, whether it be artwork or shelving or, an enhanced material like stone, or if it's a kitchen, cabinets, things like that. What draws your eye down a space as well. So the ends of corridors and things like that. Finishes from what the interior designer provides are super important as well. So understanding how those finishes accept lighting, the reflectancy of those different finishes, the coloration, how that might affect the actual color of the light that we choose to specify. Furniture selection for sure, furniture plans, making sure that, we never lay out a plan without understanding the furniture first. That's number one, really, understanding that.
It's easy to look at RCP or, a floor plan or a representation of the architecture of the space and have tendency to say, well, I want the lighting to be symmetrical to the architecture and not necessarily what's happening within the architecture. Do you guys put lights, how do you decide where you want to put a light in a space?
Yeah, it's case by case always. There's no layout criteria that we can use for every project. Ideally, things line up if it works out, but sometimes it doesn't, and it's not the end of the world necessarily if it doesn't, and you're lighting what you're intending to light effectively.
So it's less about the location relative to the overall space and more about the location and the function of that light and what it's illuminating. The technical nature of once you've got that light in the right place is a big part of what custom home integrators want to get right, controlling it, right? Making sure that it turns on and off with the right button at the right time of day, based on the sensor, based on a million other variables. Well, okay, probably not a million, but let's just call it 10 or 20 variables. When you think about that aspect of it, controlling this design, what's the most important thing for the people who are designing those systems or ensuring the operability or interoperability of them function?
That it's user friendly. Yeah, firstly, like making sure that there's a keypad in every room, that they're not having to scroll through touch screens to turn lights on, that it's clearly labeled, that you know what those buttons are controlling. Like we always say, like somebody should be able to come over to your house or someone come in the room and like understand how to turn the lighting on without having done it before. To do that takes a lot of coordination on the back end of, grouping zones effectively and creating scenes effectively to make that kind of seamless.
In your opinion, who owns the direction and the scope of defining all of that?
It's a collaboration. That's the biggest part of, I would say, the collaborative process with AV and ourselves is that portion of the project. So I think it's certainly up to the lighting designer to identify how these lights are controlled, grouping and zoning and switching and things like that. We don't do programming, so that would fall onto the AV side as far as setting all those dimming scenes. But yeah, it's a really important part of the end of the project, and that collaboration and coordination with AV and the lighting team.
When you get to the end of the project, it's there, it's done. What's one of your, we'll just call it, in the last 2 years, one of your most favorite projects that you've walked into where you just nailed it? The whole team nailed it.
Well, there's one story that was kind of fun recently. There was a client that we worked with. This was a residential project who we didn't have like the best interactions with. She just was maybe not the most warm person throughout the project. A little difficult, no huge issues, but it wasn't until the very end we get out to the job site and we're doing our final focus. And she starts to see the space come alive based on the input that we're giving the programmer with different dimming scenes. At that point, everything had been kind of like set at one level. So we're dropping things where needed and dimming things, artwork and tabletops and things like that. And we could just see her eyes light up and her get super excited about it. And she was like, she went down to her wine cellar, broke out like her really expensive bottle and started pouring us all wine as we're walking the job with her. And we could just see how happy and excited she was. And I don't think she was anticipating that level of like satisfaction just by adjusting the light levels. So that was like super rewarding, especially when someone wasn't maybe necessarily like the nicest to work with, and to see her get super excited and happy about it was great.
You obviously knew you were going to do that. It's part of every project, that final focus, getting the lights where they need to be based on the intentionality of that space and programming it. From a collaborative standpoint, I think you've hammered it home to us all over and over again. You've got to communicate. You've got to follow up. You've got to ask questions, because this stuff is technical. This stuff is hard. What are Garrett's top 5 tips or top 5 questions or top 5 things to think about every day, all day long when it comes to lighting?
It's firstly understanding like what phase of the project you're in to ask the right questions. But do we have all the plans that we need? Do we fully understand the space during design? If we're in, construction, have we received a budget yet? Do we need to get somebody on board to review the budget before it gets too late? Have we reviewed submittals yet? Big part of what we do as well. It's making sure what gets ordered is actually what it's supposed to be. And those things change all the time. So those are big questions we're constantly asking of the contractors and the rest of the team to make sure things, go well.
That's 3. You got 2 more for me?
Is everybody happy that we're working with? Are we creating a good experience for our clients and the design team? I think that's super important. I think a lot of times we get blinded by making sure we're providing the best outcome and the best product, but sometimes lose sight of what it is actually like to work with someone in the process. So are we nice to work with? Are we fun to work with?
I appreciate you breaking down what is fundamentally the basics of lighting design, to think about what to consider, why it's important, and also what that can result in terms of a beautiful outcome. As you look to the future of your career as a lighting designer, what's the one thing that you're most excited about?
The best project is yet to come, right? It's constantly looking forward and constantly, I think we're proud of the work that we do, but we're never quite satisfied. And it's constantly looking for that next exciting project. Getting into more of the business side of things and just improving our systems, our internal systems has been real fun for me lately. It's like, kind of stepping away, not completely stepping away from the design because I'm still very much involved with that, but like thinking about how I'm designing the business as well, and systems that we create to, do the best job that we can, and enjoy the time that we're, working with people. So yeah, it's been fun.
Well, I wish you luck in continuing to develop those business systems, exploring where that next project is coming from. And I really do hope that you have fun along the way, especially since it's something you think about all the time and put out there to people. Thanks so much for joining me for this conversation. I appreciate it. Enjoy your time at this conference in Dallas and LytePOD and get to meet more people who love lighting. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Sam. Appreciate it.